Okay, so this is my last and final video, just kind of discussing how the process was about my theory and my practical exam for my licensing to become an esthetician. So, first thing first, I just can't discuss everything, but I can just give you little cues and tips, right, to help you if you're just a little bit nervous or you need a little tips. Okay, so for testing, right, for theory, the way I passed my theory is I went through all the questions, right? And I marked the questions I was unsure about, right? So I kind of flagged them. And then what I did is I went back and reviewed the questions I flagged, and I reread the question, made sure that I answered in the order that I needed to go through, and just really carefully read the question rather than skimming through it because I didn't know it and I'm rushing and I'm trying to, to finish the timeline. So what I did is I reread the questions slowly and carefully and went ahead and selected my answer. Okay, once I did that, I went ahead and reviewed the entire test, y'all. I still had enough time. So what I did is I reviewed the entire test, okay? So what I did is I went back to the very beginning, and it'll allow you that option to go to the very beginning. So I went from test number 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, and reread my questions and made sure that my answers were accurate. Because sometimes when you are test taking, and you're a little bit nervous, sometimes you do know the answer, but you select the wrong one. So please make sure before you hit submit, you go over your marked questions that you were unsure about. You review those very slowly and carefully. Read the question very slowly and carefully. Sometimes, you may not catch it the first time, but the second time it'll make sense. And then review the entire test one last time before hitting submit. And then once you hit submit, you will be okay. I just don't want y'all to be rushing. It's very important. You have that one chance at one time, and then we don't know when we're able to retest. If we're not able to pass that first time, it could be months, it could be weeks, and it'll delay your licensing. So we don't want that to happen for y'all ladies. So make sure, answer all the questions to the best of your ability. Make sure you mark off those questions you're not unsure about, very clear about. And then after you do that, you reread your entire test. I know it sounds like tedious, but you must do it because guess what? There may be some questions that you actually knew the answer to and that you selected the wrong answer to. Okay, so make sure you take time to go ahead and review your test. Okay, so next, for practical, right? Make sure you arrive early because it's always nice to arrive early, right? Couple things, make sure you pack more than enough gloves. Make sure that maybe it'll be best, I would say, to pack some little wipes because it'll assist you quicker. Now, I was actually the first one to go. There was about, I think, like a good group of us. I can't really say exactly how many of us, but there was a good group of us in there. And for me personally, I was called the first. So before any of the girls went, I had to go first. So the thing about my presentation is I always made sure to disinfect my table before and after. Now there were mirrors. I can say that there were mirrors in the room. So with the mirrors, it's just you can see your own reflection, which is quite interesting. So it'll actually assist you to see yourself in the mirror, making sure that you're following each step by step. What I would recommend, right, is making sure that your labels are facing the proctor. That's very important. Okay. Also, make sure that you put it in the order when you're like organizing your station. Make sure you put it in the order that you're doing that process. Like for example, if you're doing makeup, you put it in a certain order. If you're doing like your facials, you put it in a certain order, so that way And also Q-tip is like definitely open the lids. Like let's say for example, right, when you're doing waxing, when you're doing facials, like literally open the lid of the jar and then just place it right on top of the jar before you start, because the last thing you want is to have all your items ready on hand and then you have to open your product and you're like, oh my gosh, I already have the cotton ball in my hand and I already have the wooden stick in my hand. Like, what am I gonna do now? I don't have an extra hand. Make sure you go ahead, open your product, leave the lid slightly on, and then when you're ready to use it, you can just lift grab your item and then place it right back. So yes, that's definitely a cue. What I had to do for my practical in order to be able to pass it is that I went ahead and I made sure to practice, right? Practice over and over again at home. I did videos and I watched my own self, you know, in video, right? So repetition. I also recorded myself, just like by voice, and then I would reiterate that while I was doing the steps, so that way it was able to like be locked in and I could remember everything. And also when you are learning something, you want to be able to like to teach it to somebody, because that's how you know you really got it down to the cue. Okay. Another thing I want to say, just for a suggestion, because I did notice this. Okay, I noticed this, but it wasn't like exactly because like, you know, it was something I was doing in comparison, but I just noticed that some of the girls were a bit nervous. So if let's say you're very, very nervous, like if you're the type of person to be very nervous and maybe you forget to disinfect your table, that'll knock off some points. So why don't you, you know, make sure in a Ziploc bag, you put some extra gloves, right? So put some extra gloves in your Ziploc bag inside your baggie. So let's say you have, right, you have one bag for your facials, you have one bag for your makeup, you have one bag for your waxing. So why don't you grab a Ziploc bag, okay, put some gloves in there and put those gloves inside your setup kit and inside your individual procedures, which is like your facials, your waxing procedures, and then your makeup procedure. Like, do that, because you know we all get nervous. It's okay, as humans we get nervous before an exam or a test, but the last thing I want to see any of the ladies do is just start prepping and doing the service without disinfecting the table. Please make sure y'all pack more than enough gloves. Y'all need a lot of gloves. I'm telling y'all, it's better to have more than enough gloves than not enough gloves. Okay, so I would say maybe an estimate like 25 gloves, and probably that's overdoing it. Don't look at me weird, but like I want to really make sure y'all pack more than enough gloves. And then hand sanitizer, right? Your hand sanitizer is your key. You can't do anything without your hand sanitizer. You can't touch a product without using hand sanitizer. You can't apply product to the face without hand sanitizer. You just can't throw anything out without using hand sanitizer, so you're gonna have to use hand sanitizer constantly, okay? All right, so let me see if there's anything else that I can give you as a tip. I'm thinking. I would say probably just watching, you know, over and over again. Like if your school offers you time to practice, you could just watch other students as they're practicing their practical setup. Ooh, this is a really good one. How about, I know this is gonna sound really weird, but how about you remove all of the items from your bag, right? And try to figure out what items are for which setup. So let's say, for example, right, for me, this helped me too. Because at first when you receive a kit, because my school gave me a kit, it automatically had everything in the bag. So it was just like, it was a little bit more smooth sailing, but I didn't really know, like, if someone were to ask me, oh, what's in your bag? Like, I would know how to use it for setup, but I wouldn't necessarily know how to call off each item one by one. So yeah, I think that would be very helpful. Now I can, you know, say what items one by one is in there, but I would say like knowing your products that's in your bag is really gonna help you, right? So like if, let's say like you were the type of person that you were organizing this bag for a student, or you're organizing this bag and prepping this bag for somebody, okay? Why don't you go ahead and know every single item in that bag, so when it comes time to doing that service, you already know 1, 2, 3, 4 how everything goes, right? Because you have a lot of bags, right? You have about 4 bags and they got a lot of items in there. So for your disinfectant, right, you probably have about 8 items in there at minimum, right? Your facials, you have a lot of items in there, right? So you want to be able to like be like, okay, if these bags were to get mixed up, or let's say something happened and God forbid, you know, you lost some bags and you needed to go to your test the next day, like you already know what belongs in your bag and you can create that kit again, like without even having to overthink it, right? So yeah, everybody's a little bit different, but I would just say repetition. Maybe watching my videos would be helpful, but once again, that's to use at your discretion. I'm not a professor. I'm not a teacher. I am a graduate, but I also am not able to like give you exactly like how they format their exams or what they take points off or what they mark as passing. Like I don't have that information, and nor can I share that information. Okay, it's really strict regulations, but this is for the Maryland practical, right? Okay, so if any of y'all have any questions, or if you are a bit nervous, don't be nervous, you're gonna do great. Also for theory, another thing that helped me was the PSI. So I use the PSI theory practice. So I log into PSI. You can easily do that. Go into PSI, purchase like a practice exam. It had about 3 practice exams, a bunch of questions from each section, and that literally helped me. Y'all, another cue. This is gonna sound very weird, but I'm telling y'all it works. Having good home cooked meals and sleeping. Okay, these are the 2 things I've noticed a pattern for myself, right? So before I'm taking a big test, right, I want to make sure I eat well and I sleep well. And what my routine is, right, is I will go ahead and I will study, right? Let's say I'll study like in the middle of the day, 2 days before my exam. And then what I did is the night before my exam, in the evening, like I would go ahead and redo these like questions and these exams. And then I had my exam that same day, the next day, right? But I did make sure to go to bed a decent hour. I think it was around 9 o'clock I went to bed that evening. And then I woke up and my exam was that next following day. Probably, I think it was, it's been a minute. What time? I know it was in the afternoon. I don't know exactly what time, but it was in the afternoon. And what I did, I made sure to take my textbook and reread like the most important chapters, but with the images. So I'm like a visual person, so I looked at the images according to the vocabulary terms, and I kind of reviewed that over and over and over again, and went over like some questions that I had from my textbooks. And I also made sure, because I made my own like little kind of like study guide for myself. So I reviewed that, and what I did with the study guide I made is like I did like vocabulary terms, and I typed out the definition, and I highlighted the most important part. So like I would highlight the word, and then I would highlight the cues inside the definition that will help me determine and recognize that word. So that could be helpful for you all, but I would say generally when you are taking an exam, don't overload your brain with too much information. So right, so like I would do like a short, I think it was like about 2 hours I studied that morning right before my exam in the afternoon, and I just stopped at there. Like I was like, I'm just gonna review these key terms and then I'm gonna stop, because your brain can be overloaded, and once it's overloaded, like it cannot take in any information, and then you forget everything. So if you're that type of person, make sure, right, make sure like the 3 days before your exam, right, 3 days before your exam, you're gonna be able like to study, right? So pace yourself. The night before, make sure you get some good sleep, okay? Make sure you go to bed early. You can review some of the items, right? And then the next day, you kind of want to skim, do like a brief review. A brief review varies from everybody, but for me, it was about 2 hours, and I did that brief review, and then I went and took my test. So once again, I would say like the knowledge, it depends on what type of person you are. If you're like a morning person, an evening person, or afternoon person. I am a morning person. I'm not so much of a night person, because I just start to get really sleepy sometimes, especially if I'm studying. But here's my cue. So once again, the PSI, I would do that sporadically. PSI, I would do sporadically the questions. Even like when I was in class and we had a little bit of downtime, I would be doing the PSI questions. PSI questions were very upfront, straightforward, so that would be helpful for your actual exam. So that's definitely key right there. I would say strategize your time. So don't overload yourself to the point that you're not getting enough sleep or you're not able to intake information. Make sure you're taking breaks. Okay. Another thing is like when you are taking breaks, right? I found myself like when I take a break, I actually do better than when I'm overstudying. So the results come, you know, especially when you take a break. So make sure you're taking breaks. And then with the practical as well, I would do my practical, like let's say I would do my setup and my practice, I would do that, and it would probably take me like an hour and a half to get through the whole process of each section. And then I would say, okay, I'm stopping after this, because if I continue to do it over and over and over and over again, I'm going to catch myself making bad habits that is not the way that's correct. And I'm going to find myself just like skimming through it and trying to rush through it rather than like taking my time and making sure I'm doing it properly, right? So for practical, make sure y'all are taking your time. If you want to just set like an alarm or a timer, you can do that for yourself, and whatever you get through that time, that's all you can get through, and that's all your brain can intake for that hour or that hour and a half, right? And then you get back to it the next day and the next day. Okay, I just don't want you guys to keep doing it over and over and over again to the point where you're just like, oh, I'm so sick and tired of this, and I don't feel like I'm doing it correct because I'm rushing myself. And you don't want to rush yourself. You want to take your time. Okay, so make sure you take your time, know what's in your baggies, know how to set up, make sure you're disinfecting even before you start anything that you do. You disinfect your table. Make sure you wear your gloves. Okay, you want to change your gloves out. Okay, all right, so these are cues. If there's anything else that I could be helpful for, just please reach out if you have any questions. Also, if there's any comments below for estheticians who are licensed and you want to be able to give advice to other estheticians who have just recently graduated or are taking their theory or practical soon, please leave some comments down below. Thank you so much, and good luck to you all, and have a great day. Bye.